welcome back to the Hot Lap where, well, we're looking at the Dutch Grand Prix, and what a race that was. The 2023 Heineken Dutch Grand Prix, Max Verstappen record-breaking race, and arguably the best race of the year so far. However, let's be honest, that's not much competition, is it? So, Max Verstappen won in a race that from lap one was almost quite chaotic because the rain came down. Half the grid, some of the grid pitted, some of the grid didn't. The safety car ended up coming out. It was quite wet, too wet for slicks for most people. And then they continued, and right towards the end it rained again, to the point it rained so much that the race was red flagged. People did pit on the extreme, well, on the actual wets, which have proven once again to be completely pointless. But a really, really interesting race. Overall, a quite exciting race, despite the fact that if I said to you Max Verstappen won, behind him it was really interesting. And even Max wasn't in the lead for the whole of it either. The race, I think, was a total, as you can see here, of 2 hours and 24 minutes and 4 seconds, 0.411 to be exact. But let's go from that. Logan Sargent did not finish. Not really a surprise. 0 to 0 stuff from qualifying in the top 10 to going to crashing in the top 10, then to going out. Okay. Also, Leclerc, he seemed to have damaged his car. I think he mentioned he was racing maybe Lando Norris, perhaps, but he damaged his car. And he was languishing in the mid to high teens, wasn't he, throughout the race, the middle of the race, after the first safety car. And people were just passing him left, right and centre, it seemed. And you could tell there was something wrong with that Ferrari. No way is Leclerc normally that slow. And then Zhou finishing, not really, didn't qualify for finishing position, not classified. But he ended up going out on lap 62 with, a crash. It was raining really, really heavily, and that really was a result of the red flag coming out when he crashed turn one. He wasn't the only one that went out on turn one. He was on the inters. Sergio Perez went off. Even the great Lewis Hamilton took an excursion. But none of them went off as much as Zhou. Is that experience? Potentially, because he was the only one that really, really crashed, and there's no way he was stopping it. With the others, I think we're a bit more tentative going into that first corner. But other than that, Zhou was doing really, really well. He was up there in a podium position initially after everyone was pitting for the craziness of the tyres. But George Russell, yes, classified as 17th, but he did not finish the race. He came in, I think, to retire because, well, poor George. He went up against Lando Norris. Really good overtake after the final safety car restart on lap, I'm not too sure, it was 65, 66, it was around then. And then Norris came back at him and they touched, and it just ended up having poor George to retire the car. He started third, really good qualifying, and he ended up right back because, and let's be honest, some absolutely ludicrous decisions from Mercedes to keep both of their cars out, and McLaren, but we'll get into that in a bit. Absolutely horrendous decision, which really, really hurt them, when I think, as we mentioned on our qualifying show, that Mercedes had the pace to finish second or third, but to get on the podium, I think they had the second fastest car out there, potentially faster than even Perez as well. Probably not Verstappen, but we'll get into that in a bit. Kevin Magnussen finishing 16th for Haas Ferrari. Not bad, really, considering the chaos. He did finish, which is good. Out the points. But yeah, there we go. Yuki Tsunoda ended up being beaten by Liam Lawson, but he was up there, looking really, really good, right up there. Well inside the top 10, the top 5 at some points, and after the first safety car, he was basically in front of Norris and Hamilton. They just could not get past him. He was doing gangbusters, and then for some reason, but Norris and Hamilton pitted, and they decided not to pit him, which once again I don't understand the logic there, because it was a guaranteed, really solid points finish for him. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo Ferrari, kind of like, okay, yep, he was up there again at points, but yeah, Bottas doing Bottas things, let's say. He does need to prove himself, doesn't he? With Audi coming, soon-ish in the next few years. If he wants to race and still be there, he needs to show a bit more, doesn't he? Liam Lawson, though, wow. I mean, if he doesn't qualify for your driver of the day, he's definitely in the conversation, isn't he? 13th. Started last. He had nothing to lose in a way coming into this weekend. And what a baptism of fire this race was for him. I mean, everything was thrown at him, apart from snow and lava, I imagine. So I think he did really well. He kept it on the circuit. Didn't have a crash. Didn't cause anyone else to have a crash. Fantastic. Nico Hülkenberg, this is the kind of race where you look at with the chaos and people making wrong decisions, where you kind of feel that people like the Haas in these conditions, because they can fire up the tyres quicker, should have really done better. I remember back in the day when it was teams like Jordan would make the most of these, and Prost or Ligier would make the most of these kind of days, but alas. So Lance Stroll in 11th. Meh, bearing in mind his teammate finished second, okay. And Lance Stroll's not too bad in the wet, as we've seen before. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine in 10th. Probably be a bit jealous of his teammate, won't he? But okay, really, I guess a solid points haul overall for the Alpines when you take into account both teams. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Once again, him and Lando Norris. I mean, wow. McLaren, why? They had two cars right up there at the beginning of the race. Why, oh, why did they not pit their cars, at least one of their cars, at the end of lap 1 when it was absolutely chucking it down with rain? It was dry to start off with, and then it chucked it down by the time they got around. At least pit one of their cars, and potentially I think they would have got a podium. But they didn't. And that McLaren, I mean, at one point they were doing fastest laps in the middle of the race, looking really, really solid. So Alex Albon, one of the heroes of the race initially, for qualifying at the start. Then he I think he kept it on those soft tyres when the rain was coming down, and it was absolutely ridiculous for poor Mr. Albon. But he ended up finishing 8th, getting important points for Williams. Yeah, okay, it wasn't 4th, but bearing in mind he went right to the back at one point. I don't think you can get too upset. Really, really good drive. Lando Norris, a really good comeback drive for Lando Norris as well. But once again, you can't help but feel that they should have come into the pits. Now, was that a Lando thing? Was it a McLaren thing? I don't know. But it was we're not going to finish on the podium thing, that's for sure. So I felt really bad. I felt kind of sorry for Lando, as I did Lewis Hamilton. Started 13th, didn't pit. He started on the medium tyres, which was an interesting choice, because I think he was going to go long. But then when the rain came down, the harder spec your tyres are, the quicker they're going to lose temperature and the quicker they're going to lose grip. But they kept him out, just like George Russell and just like the two McLarens. I was shouting at the TV, losing my voice. I was like, what are you doing, Mercedes? They looked like an utter rubbish show today, to the point where I'm saying now, completely the Mercedes strategy team gets rejected the race, definitely, because what were they thinking? In 5th, I mean, also, to be fair to Hamilton, he was last at one point, finished 6th in the end, and I thought he did a really good comeback as well. All over Carlos Sainz, but alas, couldn't pass him, and Lando Norris nearly pipping him at the end as well. So well done to both Hamilton and Norris. Carlos Sainz 5th. I think that was the best potentially Ferrari were going to do on pace. Their strategies weren't too great. I think when Leclerc came in, it was very much like Eddie Irvine a la 1999 at the Nürburgring. It was almost like they were surprised that he came in, they just weren't ready. But a solid drive for Carlos. Sergio Perez, he was leading this race at one point. He was in the hunt for the race win at one point. He pitted earlier than Max on the intermediates, and he was leading the race by a substantial amount. Max Verstappen really was catching him up, but for some reason, when it was time for slicks, they pitted Max first. Max got the undercut and passed Perez, when quite often it's been allowed that the lead driver car gets the choice to finish. Gets the choice to come in, not finish, sorry. Gets the choice to come in. But they didn't give that to Sergio Perez. They decided Max would come in, which I thought was a bit unfair. They argued that Alonso was going to get him. Alonso was about a good 8 seconds down the road, and then if Red Bull were honest about it and they said, look, we wanted Max to get the record, get those nine wins. Our priority is Max. Absolutely. Okay, a bit unfair, but I understand at least you're being honest. But as we'll get into, we'll see if you guys believe what what the Red Bull team says. But Pierre Gasly in third because Perez ended up speeding in the pit lane, getting a 5-second penalty. Well done, Pierre Gasly. Absolutely fantastic. Stayed, within the zone once we realised Perez had that 5-second penalty. Fernando Alonso, he got driver of the race, but I can't help but feel he's kind of asleep at the restart on, I think, the one race, a bit like Monaco, where that was the strategy. He maybe had the pace to pass Verstappen in the first couple of laps. I mean, part of me just thinks, just send it down the inside, see what happens. Just send it down the inside. Is this his last chance of winning a race this year? Possibly. I think it depends how good that Aston Martin. But Max Verstappen, pretty much flawless, really, overall weekend. Him in the car as one, I guess, and well done Max for obviously equaling the record that Sebastian Vettel had in 2013 in terms of wins. But let's get into that Christian Horner. He was grilled after suspicions of Max Verstappen favouritism at the Dutch Grand Prix. This is from planetf1.com. Horner allayed any fears that Red Bull had intentionally undercut Perez with the Verstappen at the Dutch Grand Prix, explaining that Verstappen's outlap pace even caught the team by surprise. A downpour at the start of the Dutch Grand Prix triggered very early key strategy calls across the grid. Perez moving into the lead after being the first to take a punt and switching to intermediate tyres. Verstappen then, though, got the jump on Perez when it came to the switch back to slicks. Perez stopping a lap later and then losing the lead to Verstappen, who had been obliterating the deficit on his teammate on Inters. He was coming really fast. Now, speaking of Sky F1 about the frantic flurry of action, Horner has said, it was tricky because when you're the first car, it's very hard to make that call. Checo pulled the trigger, made a great call, got in. The team reacted super fast. We got him back out. We then got Max in immediately. Others we were surprised to see stay out. And then, of course, Max started coming through the field so quickly. Checo at the front had pulled a good gap as well and was focused on trying to get a pit stop over the cars behind. So that was pivotal in that first part of getting calls right, he says. Perez, though, was left without the position to show for that sharp decision-making after that Verstappen undercut. And Horner explained that the team had not manufactured this position swap, with Verstappen on his outlet going far quicker than they expected. He says, well, there were a couple of reasons behind making that decision, Horner stated. One was that we'd obviously had Alonso taking the slicks as well, and I think Gasly was behind him in the pace of the undercut. If we'd pitted Checo first and Max second, we had the risk of coming out after they had shaken down as being first and fourth. Okay, so what he's saying is they didn't think Max would get him, so they pitted Max first. They didn't think Max would get him because he was going to have a slow outlap, but they were really, really surprised about Max's outlap, okay? But then he goes on to say that other teams had pitted and were going quick, and that's why we had to do it to cover Max. Okay, Christian, having said that, this is the man in 2022 who were like, no, Red Bull haven't breached the budget cap. I mean, yeah, to be fair, I think he said we submitted our things under the budget cap, but was really, really cross and was looking at even, civil lawsuits, wasn't he? He was threatening, and Eli, well, he was economic with the truth, let's say. And I think potentially, based on some evidence, when it comes to team bosses talking massive, so much salt, you probably need the hospital. You take this not with a grain, but I'm thinking a barrel load of salt in terms of what Christian Horner's saying. Just be honest. Verstappen's our number one. Ferrari always were, and Benetton were in the Schumacher days. I don't get it. Just say, yeah, we wanted Verstappen. We wanted a guarantee of Verstappen victory. And okay, you might get a few people going, "Oh, that's really unfair," but then at least you're honest, and no one can then, I don't know, talk like shade about you or whatever, because you've been honest. But there we go. Okay, Lewis Hamilton thinks Mercedes have the pace to challenge Max Verstappen. This is from Sky F1. Hamilton finished 6th for the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix, finding himself near the back of the field early in the race. He's 12 points behind Fernando Alonso going into the Italian Grand Prix. So, Hamilton, as we know, he started 13th and he was right down on 18th. However, he came through the field together with Norris and eventually finished 6th. Hamilton was close to a top 5 results, and he was, as we know, he was pushing Carlos Sainz all the way. Today, I had the pace in those conditions if we made the right calls. I could have challenged the top 2. We would have challenged Max, particularly when we got to the drive. Pace-wise, we weren't terribly far off, he told Sky Sports F1. I'm not saying we would beat them, but I think we would have been happy. And it's still nice. It's still nice if you think that way. Now, Mercedes' strategy put Hamilton on the back foot, but the 7-time world champion produced one of his best drives to fight back. He admits that the team made the wrong call, but was satisfied with his recovery. He said, "I feel really good. I didn't know how today was going to go. I sat there last night, racking my brain. Where did we go wrong? How did we end up in this position? Then I was figuring out how I could progress up the order," explained Hamilton. "Then I was the only one on the medium tyres, and I wanted to be offset to the people around me, not everyone on the grid. That rain came, and as a team we made the wrong decision. Ultimately, it was the team's call. We paid the price for that. We came out last, and after that we kept chasing, head down. It was a really good example of when you fall or stumble, to get back up and keep trying. Every time I had to pit, I came out behind and kept chasing. I was really happy when I got past the McLaren, for example, which isn't easy to do on this track. I was quick in the signs at the end. I just needed DRS." Did he have the pace? I don't know. In the conditions, maybe. Their race pace in practice was the closest, I think, to the Red Bulls. And I can't help but feel that Hamilton behind Verstappen, rather than Alonso behind Verstappen on the safety car restart, may have had more of a go. But and talking about Alonso, though, this is on motorsport.com. Alonso considered a late lunge on Verstappen in the F1 Dutch Grand Prix. Alonso finished in a rain-affected red flag Zandvoort race, 3.7 seconds behind home hero Verstappen. Now, when the race restarted with 6 laps to go, after a long delay for a break in the weather, Alonso considered making a lunge on Verstappen in turn 1. He said, "I did think about trying the move on the last restart, but then I thought maybe I cannot exit the circuit, so I stayed calm in second," Alonso joked, referring to obviously that sea of orange. He said, "The energy in Zandvoort is very unique. When this race came on the calendar, I thought I would never experience a Zandvoort podium because I was not in a position to think about that. And today it is going to be very special to share the podium with Max, okay?" But yeah, so he considered a late lunge. Okay, but you didn't, did you? Just a joke. Fair enough. I think he should have. He was a kind of asleep though on the restart, so had he been a bit closer, maybe, because Max was really slow on that first lap. But that's from motorsport.com. And also, update on Ricciardo undergoes surgery and metalwork on hand. As we know, he injured his hand. So Ricciardo has been sidelined by injury 3 rounds into his F1 return after crashing, as we know, at second practice. There's a lovely picture of Ricciardo there. Now, with Red Bull reserve Liam Lawson, to get rid of that, deputising for Ricciardo, the current Japanese Super Formula runner-up progressed from 19th to 13th on his first F1 debut. Fantastic, wasn't it? Brilliant. Ricciardo has confirmed via social media that he underwent an operation on Sunday morning. And he's posted on his Instagram, "Hey everyone, had surgery this morning, got my first bit of metal work, so that's cool. Big thanks to everyone who reached out and kept my spirits up. This ain't a setback, it's just all part of the comeback." See what he did there, very good. It is understood that Ricciardo's statement will involve working with Dr. Xavier Mir. And Mir, as we know, or you may not know, but he operated on Lance Stroll following the cycling crash that ruled him out of pre-season testing. And the Aston Martin driver contested the season opener a week later. Now, Ricciardo is highly likely to miss the Monza Grand Prix. That's his last victory and McLaren's last victory in 2021. The AlphaTauri boss, Franz Tost, told Motorsport.com, "For me, it looks like Liam will do Monza because I don't think that Danny will be ready to race in Monza. We will send Lawson to the sim this week to be prepared for Monza." So fair play. I mean, Liam Lawson, everything to prove in Monza. It'll be a proper weekend for him. Let's see how close he can get to Tsunoda. Maybe even beat him. That'll be really, really interesting. And that's going to raise quite a few questions at Red Bull then, isn't it? Who are they going to have at AlphaTauri? And if Sergio Perez keeps on being average, let's say, compared to Max, who are they going to have there? Although Toto Wolff came out, didn't he? And he said he was questioning why the gap is so large. I think you know, whether is Red Bull, do they have parity with their cars? I think they probably do. Why would they not? You can argue that they don't have parity with their strategy after this race, but there you go. But there we go. I mean that's the Dutch Grand Prix. I mean, you got. I'm going to give Noel Lawson man of the race. So yes, he finished. He only done 13th. He didn't embarrass himself, and he had a wet practice 3 suddenly to go on straight into what was a difficult qualifying session and a very difficult race. He didn't embarrass himself. I think he did really, really well. But obviously, special mention to Alonso, and obviously Hamilton and Norris after their horrendous first few laps and strategy calls. But there we go. I mean, this has been the hot lap. I'm trying to close this. Yeah, this has been the hot lap, and we'll speak to you next time, probably tomorrow, where we look at all the fallout news from the Dutch Grand Prix.